Hello, I'm Dana. Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, welcome. Happy New Year. I hope everyone is having a great new year. Ours have been eventful so far, but it actually started at the end of last year. Christmas was good. That was my last video. The week after Christmas, Tim and I went out of town. Well, really just 2 hours away. He had to work out of town in a city called Grand Rapids. It's about 2 hours west of Detroit. He had to do a job out there, and I went with him, which I sometimes do since I don't have a regular 9 to 5 job. So we went out there. He did his job, and then we went and got something to eat before we were going to go and check in our hotel because we were staying out there for the night. And after we left the restaurant, which was like it was an experience. It was so long. It was a Friday. Yeah. No, it was a Tuesday night. But they were pretty busy because it was the 30th. So a lot of people were off work or out of school. And of course, a lot of places are short staffed. So it was a long meal experience. By the time we left, it was snowing. Actually, it was snowing earlier, but by the time we left to head to the hotel, it had picked up. So when we left out of the restaurant, the roads were covered. So we left the restaurant and got on the main road. And Tim wanted to go get Starbucks. So he got in the turn lane. You couldn't see the lines, by the way, but it was pretty obvious that we were in the turn lane. There were 2 lanes of traffic going in both directions. So we were going to make a left turn. And so we were just sitting there waiting for the cars to pass by before we could make our turn. And while we're sitting there, we're kind of chatting, and we see this car coming toward us in the center lane. And we're thinking, okay, she's either going to get over in the oncoming traffic, or she's going to make a left in the opposite direction that we were turning. She keeps coming, and I'm like, oh my gosh. I start screaming Jesus because that's what we do. And boom, she hits us head on. And it was such an impact that it pushed me forward to the dashboard because I was in the seatbelt, but my knees hit the dashboard so hard that after the impact, my hands just immediately went to my shins. And I was rubbing my shins like in pain, like, oh my gosh, in anguish. The lady is sitting there. We couldn't move. That was it. Like, we couldn't move. So we're just sitting there. Tim calls 911 right away. The lady gets out of her car, and it's snowing. Traffic is still coming by both sides of us, and she's getting out of her car. It was so dangerous. We could tell that she was under the influence of some substance, and she kept doing her hands like this, like she just had this look like she didn't know what just happened. And Tim was telling her to get in her car because we didn't want someone to hit her. So she would get in her car, and then a few seconds later, she would get back out of her car. And like she was just not coherent, really. So the police came and the ambulance came, and we did end up going to the hospital. We had to go in the ambulance. That was my first experience riding in an ambulance truck. And so we were in the back of the truck. They were checking all of our vitals and asking us different questions. We were fine, but I didn't know if my legs were swelling or not. Since I didn't know, Tim recommended that we do go to the hospital and get checked out. So we did that. We get to the hospital, we get checked in. The hospital is packed of people. So I'm sitting there thinking, like, all I wanted to do, no, 2 things I'm sitting there thinking, because I was cold in the restaurant. So it was like the main thing that I wanted to do was go to the hotel and crank up the heat. And plus, I was exhausted. I had been up since probably 5 that morning, and I don't know if I slept that great the night before or not, but I was tired. And by the way, I'm back. I, I I got off on a tangent, but I am actually back to do a reading of my book, 7 Years to Surrender. But I'm going to get to that in a second. So I'm just like anticipating before we even left the restaurant. I'm like, I can't wait to get to that room and get warm and get some sleep. The second thing I was thinking was while I was sitting in the hospital, is this just for the next book? The day before, Tim and I were getting ordained at our church as pastors, which, by the way, we had just found out about that Sunday. That's a whole nother story. But yeah, that's what I was thinking. So we're sitting in the hospital waiting, and they're calling different names. And, I had kind of hunkered down for the wait, put my patient's hat on, and just prepared myself. So they call several names while we're sitting there. And one time, one of the nurses came from the back room or whatever, and one of the patients that was waiting in the waiting room asked how long it was going to be. Like, if he could get some type of information, expectation for how long he would have to wait. I don't know what his ailment was. I didn't even look at him, but I just heard him because he was sitting on my right side. And the nurse just let him know she had no idea. It was kind of like, clearly we are busy and I can't give you any type of expectation of how long you're going to have to wait. So that let us know even further that we had a long night ahead of us. So we sat there a little longer and they said Reeves, and we held our hands up and they took us to one area and asked us some questions. Then they took me back to the waiting room. Tim was still kind of like in the hallway or whatever this other area was. And like I said, there were people everywhere. So I got back in the waiting room where I was originally. And a few minutes later, another nurse came out and wheeled me to the x-ray room. And I'm just in the wheelchair, like, wow, just processing it all for the book. Like making all of these mental notes, right? Because like the pain was increasing, but it was still like, okay, what is this all about, Lord? So go to the x-ray room and get the x-rays taken. Then she took me back to the waiting room. And I'm sitting there listening to another patient behind me. I didn't see her, but I heard her talking because she was talking rather loudly. And she's just kind of like explaining to the guy that was sitting next to her about why she was there. And she was stating she had cut her finger apparently. Before she cut her hand, her mother had told her to be careful with the knife. Long story short, she's in the hospital. I don't know the story. So she was sitting there thinking like, is this incident worth sitting here for an unknown amount of time? So she was saying, she was thinking to herself, maybe I'm not in so much pain. And that's what you start to think when you're sitting there waiting. You rationalize, what do I do from here? Should I wait or should I go? And so that thought crossed our minds as well. But we sat there, and thankfully, it didn't take as long as we thought it was going to take. Because once they put me back in the waiting room after the x rays, a few minutes later, they came and wheeled me to another room. We both went in wheelchairs, by the way. Tim was okay. He was feeling a little bit of stiffness in his neck and his back before we even went to the hospital, like while we were sitting in the car. And he felt like he should get it checked out, but he didn't have any x-rays done. So he was standing by this time. So he walked with me to go to this other room, and we were waiting for the doctor or the x-ray tech to get the results back so that they can determine what the situation was. So we sat there for a few minutes, and the doctor came in even before the x-rays came back, and he asked me some questions and looked over my legs, and he didn't expect anything major was happening. He didn't see any swelling. He didn't feel that there were any broken bones. He asked me about my pain level, if I wanted some pain medication, and soon after we headed home. I was able to get up and walk, and we called an Uber and went to wait for our Uber. And that didn't take too long either. So everything was moving okay at a relatively moderate pace. When we get in the Uber, it's still snowing. The Uber driver is not driving slowly. We're in Michigan. We get it. People feel like they are pros at driving in the snow and bad weather. It was just like at that point, it was like it was out of my hands, and I knew we would be safe. We would make it to the hotel without another incident or accident, and I would get in the bed and go to sleep. And we made it safely, thank God. It was actually in the same area that we had left because the restaurant and the hotel were in the same area. So we got in our room, got settled, and I got in bed and had an awesome night. My sister-in-law and her husband came to pick us up the next day, which was New Year's Eve, by the way. And we had to prepare ourselves to go to church and be ordained as pastors. So that happened, and it was a beautiful ceremony. Yeah, so it's a lot of shifting happening. So things are happening, things are moving, and we're just sitting back in expectation. So that was a long story, a long intro to how things are going. So I hope your 25 ended uneventful and that your new year is off to a great start. So cheers to 2026. I am about to read my book, 7 Years to Surrender, another chapter. The previous chapters that I have read so far, 1 to 5, are in the description below. So please feel free to check those out. I'm reading chapter 6 today. Yeah, I thought the last two chapters were deep, just reading it and, like I said, putting me back in that mindset of, one, when I wrote the chapters and wrote the book, and then two, the actual timing of when the actual event happened. So, all right, I have my tea, or actually it's just water with lemon juice, honey, and some ginger. I try and drink this several times a week. All right, let's read. Chapter 6, My Christmas. Lef and I continued to date secretly, of course. I really liked him, and as a bonus, I was getting my teeth straightened for free. The perks of dating a dentist. One evening, I went to his office after hours to have some dental work done and just hang out. Technically, it was legit business, but I still felt like I was sneaking around, like someone was going to catch me in the act of living a life I wasn't supposed to be living. This was a new version of me, the one who moved in the shadows, the one who kept secrets. After the appointment, he walked me to my car, which was parked around the back of the building. When we turned the corner, I froze. My car window had been smashed. I freaked out. Shame hit me like a slap. Guilt washed over me. My first thought wasn't even about the broken glass. It was, God is punishing me for sinning, for sneaking, for crossing the line I had no business crossing. And now I had to figure out how to fix this fast. Before anyone found out where I'd been, it was a Sunday and auto shops were closed. But Mr. Big stepped in. He made a call to one of his people, arranged the repair, and paid for it. Problem solved. But deep inside, something shifted. This wasn't who I wanted to be. I told myself again that I needed to stop seeing him. But then, there he was again, pulling me back in. He always had a way. Some time later, I noticed sores on my Christmas, my word for vagina. I panicked. I didn't know what was happening, but I knew it wasn't good. I told Lef about it. Cool as ever, he stayed calm. As always, he had connections. He gave me the number to one of his friends. Let's call him Dr. OBGYN. I booked the appointment, went in alone, terrified. The doctor examined me, and in a tone that felt far too casual for the bomb he was about to drop, he gave me the diagnosis. He said he'd prescribe me something. That was it. No pause, no warning, just a matter-of-fact statement that would quietly alter the course of my life. I was in shock. It felt worse than the day I lost my virginity, worse than the broken car window. This was permanent. This wasn't a secret I could outrun or pretend didn't exist. I believed God was punishing me. Afterward, I told Lef about it. He didn't apologize, didn't explain, and didn't seem alarmed. So I took his lead. If he wasn't treating it like a big deal, maybe I shouldn't either. But deep down, something in me cracked, and I buried it beneath a thick layer of denial. Still, in the years that followed, we had some amazing moments. Lef introduced me to new places, different experiences in a world I never knew I could enter. Our relationship eventually ran its course. He only wanted a part-time girlfriend. We broke up, and I was devastated. But I kept the door open just a little. I kept living, chasing what I felt good in the moment and avoiding what hurt. I told myself I was free, but really, I was keeping myself locked in beneath secret doors. I baked cookies safely for the most part, but the secret and the shame remained. We weren't taught how to date. We weren't taught how to build relationships. And we definitely weren't taught about STDs. When I moved out on my own at age 26, I had the illusion of freedom, but without boundaries. That lack of boundaries felt like liberation at first, but it was dangerous. It left me open, not only physically, but also emotionally and spiritually. So that's chapter 6. When I think about this chapter and in this moment, and even when I was writing this chapter, by the way, before I get started, my Christmas, I got that from a girl that was on this radio station that I used to listen to here in the Detroit area. The show is called Mojo in the Morning, and Channel 955. And she would call her vagina when they would be talking about explicit things. She would call her vagina her Christmas. So, not to be disrespectful for Christmas, but I just adopted that for this book. So that moment, I don't know how long we had been dating when this happened. I may have had some vague knowledge about STDs, but I didn't think it would happen to me, I think was probably my mindset. So when it did, and I had been to the OBGYN before, um, as a teenager, my mom would take me to the OBGYN to get checked out for, different things, bladder infections or urinary infections, whatever. So I knew about going to the OBGYN, but I didn't know what this STD was about exactly. And like I said, I didn't really get any feedback or any additional knowledge or understanding even when I did get it. We may have talked about it a little bit, but I don't recall really sitting down and talking about it, like what it meant, what I had to do. So we did continue to date for several years. I believe we started dating when I was 18 or 19, and we continued to date. This happened early on in the relationship, by the way. And I guess I was just learning how to deal with it. Nothing really significantly changed, but it was a definite shift for me. But like I said, we continued to date until I moved out when I was around 26. And I remember that he helped me move. We continued to date for a little bit after I moved out. It ended quickly after I moved because I remember being in my house in the first week or so, and I didn't have all of my furniture set up. I knew I wanted new carpet, and I remember certain things during that time, but I was I remember feeling the hurt from us breaking up. And we broke up basically because he didn't seem to want to have a full-time relationship. He wanted to date other people. So he was fine with dating me too, but I wasn't. So that's when it finally ended. The incident prior to us breaking up, finding my window smashed out that day, was an experience because I was just out living my life, and it was just all of the unknowns, all of the newness of it. Like all of the whole experience was just so new to me. But it was also freeing because I was, I didn't, other than my conscience and the guilt from living in sin, I was free to just to live out whatever was happening during that time with the dating a guy that wasn't in church and didn't really have a relationship with God. So it was just all of the newness. And even like the biggest newness, the biggest moment was the STD. Of course, I didn't realize in that moment how it had shifted my life going forward and how it would impact future relationships. So I was out in having a life that looked completely different. I mean, of course, I still continue to go to school and pursue my education, even in the midst of everything that was going on. I don't know if I cried when I found out. I don't think I did because it was just all like, so what does this mean? I didn't realize until, years and years later that it would be this cloud of shame for every future relationship that I would get into. Even though I wanted to stop baking cookies, it was just the no boundaries thing just kept me exploring, kept me living this life of freedom. Like, even though I felt the guilt and the shame, it still didn't keep me from doing it. And I think that's the biggest takeaway when you don't have a relationship with God. And even though you feel like, well, how did I not have a relationship with God? I wasn't reading my Bible. I wasn't reading the word. I didn't know how to interpret it. I didn't know how to cultivate a relationship with God. myself, an individual relationship. It was always, we go to church on Sundays, and there was no handbook in my head of how do I live from Monday to Saturday. When you get in these situations like dating a guy that doesn't have a relationship with God, so that's one aspect of the relationship, but it's also, I don't even know how to set boundaries. I don't have a relationship myself. So it's like I can't even judge a person that's not in the church, that's not saved, that doesn't have a relationship with God, because I'm still doing the thing. I'm still with him, if that makes sense. So, and I never tried to judge him, but it was just the unequally yoked. And it's always this thing about how saved people are not supposed to be with people of the world. And the thing about that is the saved person doesn't have enough willpower to be with someone unsaved, because you're going to constantly be doing the things that the unsaved person is doing, or lowering your standards. And I didn't have my standards set. So, was it a matter of being unequally yoked? It was a lot to process back then. As the book goes on, I talk more and more about the things that I did because I didn't have a relationship with God, and how it played out in my life. I was thankful that he did have the connections, though. That's one thing. He had the connections to get my car fixed. He had the connections where I don't even think I had to have insurance. I'm pretty sure I had insurance then to cover the expenses, but it was like I just kept sliding through and walking this line of what I should be doing and what I shouldn't be doing. So it was just it's a constant battle that you're pushing down. My pastor, who was also my brother, was just recently talking about the fact that when you are saved, quote unquote, I say that because it's like a lot of us say we're saved, but there's no purity of heart, or you don't see the fruit of having God's light living in you. But because we were raised in the church and we were saved, the fact that we were still able to do, or I was still able to do the things that I did, is because I didn't have a relationship with God. And I basically, even with the guilt, I was able to push that down enough. I was saying that I was able to push down the guilt to do what I was doing. I was able to, I had that's power, to be able to push down this feeling of guilt. This is my life. Salvation, I was able to push it down to do the things that I did for years. And that was so revelatory when he said that. I did it for years. But when I look at this book and I read it chapter by chapter and come on here to talk about it from this viewpoint and how things in our lives evolve. Like back then, I didn't, how was I able to do that? Because I know, like those moments where I was by myself, or I would go to church and hear a word and be convicted, but I was still able to continue to see this guy and even other guys. It blows my mind. I remember always thinking like I wanted to pull myself out. I wanted to get out of the relationship and live holy. But it was just, the flesh was so weak. Our flesh is weak, but it's the truth. That's one thing I would always think is, God, you know my heart. Like there were times where I just, it seemed like I couldn't pull myself out like I wanted to. Like I said before, I would stop calling him or tell him that I couldn't see him. And then next thing you know, I'm still with him. I'm still going out with him. I'm still accepting his invitations. But he allowed me. He allowed me. He did see my heart. And that's why, by his grace and his mercy, he allowed me to go through all of those things and to now put this book out to share it. And he still kept me. He kept me through all of these moments, all of these situations of life to get here now, to sit before you and share and have conversations about how it resonates with them, how they went through the same thing, and just to see other people being delivered from it is a miracle in itself. Really, it is. And for me to be out here in front exposing these things that we just don't talk about because of religion, and we go on with our lives not building or cultivating pure relationship with God. And that's what I've discovered over the past 10 to 15 years, that God wants relationship. And we all have our own journey. We all have a certain level of grace. And I just thank God for his grace, for the level of grace that he gave me. So let me know how this chapter resonates with you. Share in the comments and let me know if you had a similar situation and how you dealt with it and how it changed your life. So I'll leave you here for now. Thanks for watching. I'll see you soon.